This lesson leads directly on from Lesson 5, which looked at certain specific aspects of culture, such as language, to look at the related issues of the effect and impact of globalization on society as a whole. Perhaps a good place to start with this is a book which has had a very large, if controversial, impact in the area, namely Samuel Huntington's The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order. The work was produced soon after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, and Huntington's central hypothesis is as follows. The fundamental source of conflict in this new world will not be primarily ideological or primarily economic. The great divisions among humankind and the dominating source of conflict will be cultural. Nation states will remain the most powerful actors in world affairs, but the principal conflicts of global politics will occur between nations and groups of different civilizations. The clash of civilizations will dominate global politics. The fault lines between civilizations will be the battle lines of the future. Some of the key aspects of Huntington's theory are as follows. Firstly, civilizations are differentiated from each other by history, language, culture, tradition, and, most importantly, religion. These fundamental differences are the product of centuries, so they will not soon disappear. Second, the world is becoming a smaller place, meaning that the consciousness about other civilizations is intensified, and awareness of the differences between people's own civilizations and others is heightened. Third, because of economic modernization and social change, people are separated from long-standing local identities. This has been replaced by religion, which provides a basis for identity and which transcends national boundaries. Fourth, cultural and social characteristics are less mutable, i.e., they are less likely to be changed easily than political and economic ones. And finally, economic regionalism is increasing, which will influence consciousness regarding one's own civilization. Whilst there certainly seems to be aspects of what Huntington was saying which were true then, or which have become true subsequently, there does seem to have been considerable criticism of Huntington's interpretation of the effect of globalization on society. Edward Said, for example, argues that Huntington does not recognise the ways that different cultures can interact, for the better and for the worse. Noam Chomsky argues that his paradigm can be interpreted as being a justification for any atrocities that they want to carry out. Noam Chomsky argues that his paradigm can be interpreted as being a justification for any atrocities that the US wants to carry out. In the rest of this lesson, we'll look at two specific areas which reveal interesting aspects of the impact which globalization has had on society. Firstly, the increased plurality of views within societies, and secondly, the massive rise in number, power, and importance of non-governmental organisations. Historically, when the power of the nation-state was at its height, national characteristics were slightly more fixed and predictable. We can say that people's views were more homogenous, that is, if you came from a particular state, your views about particular issues could probably be fairly accurately predicted. In a globalised world, however, these norms and stereotypes do not necessarily fit very well. There are two major factors which have led to this increased heterogeneity within society. That is, the fact that a much broader range of views exists. The first reason is that people are coming into physical contact with the other on a much more frequent basis. And the second, that people are having significantly more remote or digital contact with new ideas. Increased levels of migration have led to societies, particularly those in the West, becoming more multicultural. Europe, in particular, has always had a history of pluralism, but in the last 50 or so years, this has skyrocketed. Proponents of multiculturalism from the position that culture and society is not something which can be defined on the strength of one race, one religion, or one language, but is the product of multiple factors, which have to be flexible and react to wider global changes. In many ways, the societies of the past were unchanging and fixed, which explain their more homogenous nature. However, in many societies, echoing some of Samuel Huntington's darker predictions, there has been a growing backlash against this multiculturalism. This has frequently found its voice in Islamophobia over issues such as female genital mutilation, the implementation of Sharia law, citizens living in Western countries going to fight for ISIS, and so-called honour killings. The second main way in which plurality has increased is through social media. People from around the world have the opportunity to access ideas and to communicate with people sharing those ideas around the world like never before. The advent of Facebook, Twitter, and the other hundreds of similar services has radically altered the way in which people can access information. There are many who argue that this can have a direct and significant impact on real life. For example, with many commentators arguing that the Arab Spring was directly fueled by social media. And through campaigns such as the "We Are All Khalid Said" protest on Facebook, there definitely seems to have been considerable synergy between the online and offline worlds. As technology becomes cheaper and the global middle class grows, the only logical conclusion is that people will be using this more, which would lead to even greater plurality in years to come. The second point which we will consider within this lesson is the rise of non-governmental organisations, NGOs, and the non-formal sector. The age of globalisation has seen a massive increase in the number of NGOs worldwide, especially during the 1990s in the aftermath of the end of the Cold War, where they mushroomed in a world devoid of one of its central pillars, i.e. the Soviet Union. In India, for example, there are estimated to be 3.3 million NGOs, one for every 400 people. And according to a report from Johns Hopkins University, if NGOs were a country, they would be the world's fifth largest economy. The rise of NGOs has been the result, as well as the cause, of the weakening of traditional governance processes. They are not only powerful and important domestically, but also internationally, playing particularly prominent roles in intergovernmental organisations. For example, in 1949, there were only 41 consultative groups who could formally participate in consultative processes. By 1998, there were 1,500 groups with some kind of formal role at the UN. Indeed, some NGOs are actually more global than intergovernmental organisations. Global sporting bodies such as FIFA, the International Amateur Athletic Federation, and even the International Volleyball Federation have more members than the United Nations. One of the main reasons for this has been the shrinking of the public sector, which has come about as the result of the neoliberalism which has been part and parcel of the globalization process. This privatisation has led to gaps, sometimes significant gaps in public provision, whether that be in health, education, the environment, or many other areas. There has also been a recognition that policies and programs which benefit society can be more effectively delivered by cross-border networks of people who are knowledgeable and passionate and who can communicate freely through increasingly democratic structures and the opportunities provided by information technology.